All right. Hello and welcome to the Black Tower. I'm the Sorcerer Armada Soul. And today, ladies and gentlemen, gentle bugs and gentle vermin, I bring you Thorne.
How's it going, brother?
How's that doing, brother? So I was watching your video on Azazel Part 2. And I got to say, your working with Azazel was very interesting from your first video. Your second one, though, had a lot of food for thought. Especially concerning, what are the gods and what are we, and I think that that's a nice way to summarize it without making it too dumbed down.
I hear you.
One of the concepts that you touched in on, though, that I want to go over tonight is concerning, I've always thought that this is not who we are. This is what we abide in. This is what we work through, but this is not who and what we are. And so, and if you think back to the way, the occult says it or science says it or anything like that, it's kind of like there's a tether to this physical body of a spirit, for lack of better words, that, animates, directs, and guides it and everything else. That is the so-called consciousness. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is one of those giant cans of worms for me, because there's obviously the non-dualistic approach. And I want to start with that to say that no matter what I'm saying to you here, always maintain an idea of non-separation. So in other words, anything we're talking about is as real as it is, it's no more real than any other illusion that's around us. So in other words, this idea that we are not this, as true as it is in like a mechanical sense, we still are this. So don't make the mistake of thinking you have nothing to do with this. It's more along the lines of the mechanics of how does this whole thing work together as one thing. That's the right, or at least the start of the right perspective.
Yeah, the interaction of it.
The interaction of it. Now you have to remember, like I said, get the idea of separation out of your head a little bit. Don't think of it as I'm not this and I'm piloting it necessarily. Think of it as this is how this whole thing works together. Think of it kind of like a steering wheel. When you're making a left turn, one hand has to go down and one has to go up. And to each hand, it'll look like they're opposing each other, but they're actually going the same direction. They'll look like they're doing the opposite thing, but they're actually working together. Without both of them together, you don't get a turn. So it's more like that. But to get back to what you're saying and what I said, in this experience with Azazel, little drips and drabs all the time are going into my mind. I have basically not nonstop gnosis, but it feels like everything I do, there's something I look at and there's something I got to think about relating to something he's showing me. So it's a constant trickle of new ideas to play with. And some of them come from nowhere, and some of them come from I'll be watching something on TV, and it'll just occur to me. One of the things he showed me during the first initial big event that I did on the Blood Moon was this hint about, it was just a hint that we were always in the same, see, this is where it gets hard because the words fail. You can't describe these things with English words, so you kind of make them up as metaphor and allegory and story. Bibles and all these other cultures, that's what they do. And you intuitively learn to understand the meaning, even if you can't understand the exact thing. So I'm going to be saying things that when people hear it, they have to just unplug their current cultural bias and try to plug into whatever bias I'm reciting for you, because that's all it is. It's not there isn't a real heaven, there isn't a real Garden of Eden. All those things are a cultural word for a concept that is more universal, if that makes sense. So in the before time, okay, 60,000 years ago, maybe, long time ago, before humans really developed a culture, the idea was that we were as they are, as the watchers are, as the deities are, as the gods are, as the devils are, as all of these spirits are, the higher ones, not the little imps, not the little things that the creepy crawlies that don't really matter, not the husks and the hulls and all these things. We were an elevated God form. Okay, we were a sentient, and there was things much more aware than we. Okay, somehow in this story that I was getting was this idea that we decided that we wanted to experience the material world in a visceral way. And this is where it gets a little tricky, and I can't just say it, but you have, in my metaphysic, you have this idea that you have the material world and you have an astral world. Now, this is nothing new. The astral world is more about ideas, spirit, and things like that. So in other words, you have forms with no substance. You have ideas without ideals. There's no best or worst. It's all ideas, concepts, you know what I mean? The material world is chaotic and it's solid. It's static, and there's nothing to it, but it's very vivid. So when you do experience it, you feel it much more vividly. So to something that's focused on the astral and the spiritual world, they have a very high vibrational understanding of a thing, but they don't have a very low vibrational experience of the thing. So if you burn your hand as a human being, it hurts like hell, usually, unless you develop ways to ignore it. You have a very powerful sensation. These spirits in the astral realm, if they burn their hand, it might catch on fire, it may blaze up, but they don't feel pain the same way you and I would. It's not a visceral experience. When they have food, they don't taste it quite as vividly as we do, and all these other things, if at all. That's part of the question that I have, that I'm still working with him to figure out. When we go to the astral, we can have a vivid experience because we're still anchored in a physical set of senses. But they don't have this as readily. And we didn't either at the time. As we're observing reality go by, at some point, there's these animals that look like they could have the potential, I guess. This is part of, I'm inserting some theory here because nothing comes through perfectly clear. You got to work with these beings and play with the material till you get your answers. That these ape-like beings, these pre-humans, were running around, and they saw the potential for them to be a fitting conduit, avatar, or vessel for their consciousness, okay? Because these spirits, just like all these others, have a rather dry experience of reality, a rather hollow experience of reality. And hollow not in the sense that it's meaningless, but hollow in the sense that it's not vivid. It's not, a sneeze feels good to a human. Let's be honest, right? You sneeze and it feels good. They don't have that the same way, right? They don't have that corporeal feeling. So the idea of possessing an animal was done, and it's usually done by a different sort of entity or whatever. These higher sentient awarenesses want to experience reality on this material plane because it's more fun. I mean, let's be honest, it's more entertaining, it's more exciting. And in return, we had to give up something. We had to give up our perception of the higher form. Now, if you want to go to what's that?
Hence the fall.
Right. And I was just going to say, we could go right into a biblical understanding, which I'm not big on the Bible. I know it pretty well back to front because I raised Christian. I was very into it as a kid. I don't like to couch things in too much biblical terms because I don't base my belief on biblical terms. But when the shoe fits, we wear it. You know what I mean? You got to put it on. You got to walk a mile in it to really know what fits. The principle here is that before the fall, Eden wasn't on earth per se. It was an astral experience, and astral is everywhere. You can say it's everywhere. It's all around you right now. It is a different perceptual awareness. It's non-local. Okay. When we decided we wanted to dwell in these simian beings, these ape beings, we had to, of course, tweak them a little bit. We had to guide their evolution. We had to bring them into a state of biological compatibility with the intelligence that wanted to ride in it. We didn't want to be just another dog. We wanted to be a being that could build homes and rockets to the moon and have this visual experience. It's kind of like you want to play the newest video game, so you got to build the best computer that can run it. It's kind of like that. So they assisted the evolution, and they created a man that was capable of really being piloted in this way, and not just think of it as permanent possession. Think of it as default possession, because a human being can live without a consciousness. It's pretty clear. There was a young girl quite a while back who was locked in a closet for like her whole life, and her father abused her, and she was not there. Okay. But she acted like an ape or something. She was very much like that. And this lack of experience, one could say, drove out the spirit of whatever she was, and she was left with just the animal form. You could say that it damaged the brain. It really did. It damaged the brain. So when human beings entered this and became humans as we understand them, became the biological construct around you, the theory goes that I'm working with is that Azazel, many of the other spirits that we work with, the Watchers. I mean, some people even believe that every single spirit that we work with is a form of Watcher. They're just the unknown Watchers. There's 200 plus of them. We don't know the names of all of them. You know what I mean? So we only know a couple. So for all we know, everyone that we work with, from Nyarlathotep to, Ahriman, to everything, could be a Watcher. Okay, in this idea. So when we enter this form, at some point it's irrevocable, because what happens is we stop remembering what we are, and so we, for whatever reason, kind of like a choice, it's a choice. We choose to reincarnate over and over again as these people, but there is a fall that happens. We fall down into, it's really a fall of your focus. It's not like you are cursed or sinful. You're falling, your gaze is falling to the material, and there's nothing wrong with it. Okay.
But
you would know that.
Wherever your gaze goes, wherever your thoughts go, there goes your consciousness.
100%. So you have to think of it like this. A demon is just like you, except he's focused on the astral. And his body is the body of electric light, the electromagnetic field around the whole universe, okay? That is their body, okay, if we want to get technical. Our body is also energy. It's also electromagnetic. And we'll get to that in a minute when I get into the photonic conscious idea that I've been reading about and coming up with a little bit. But so these entities were there with us, and for whatever reason, this is stuff that I still have some holes that I haven't filled in. I didn't ask, and they weren't, it's not given to me yet, and it may not be something I'm supposed to know. Okay, that might be, it's possible. It's just know this much and no more, and figure out the rest for yourself. Decide the rest for yourself. These other entities are higher order entities like us. This is why they don't like us to bow and scrape, although some do anyway, and they're like, whatever, go ahead and do it. They approach me and you as, come on, brother. They approach us as equal entities, as kings, though different. Okay, maybe ignorant kings, maybe fools, but as kings nonetheless. Okay, they still respect us, and this is because we are perhaps more aware, I guess you could say, but nothing special, just aware. We know what we are, and they treat us with that respect. Well, anyway, these beings may have been left in control and in charge of our continued development, or at least safety and concern, you know what I mean? Guides, guardians, and benevolent entities. This is why you have to understand, to them, this whole biological entity that we live in it's no more important than your shoes. If you got to destroy your shoes to survive or something, they'll kill your body. If they need your body to die in a horrible way so that you grow, they'll kill your body, and you'll move into another body and have another experience. You know what I'm saying? And it's not that they're in control of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But they're guides and guardians, and they were left in this position for us to experience from. The purpose, this is where we get back to what we were talking about before we came in to record this, is what is it to be a god, and is it even anything? For whatever reason we decided to do this is why they're doing it. You know what I mean? Whatever reason we decided we want this experience, this vivid experience, maybe it's because these entities understand that this whole idea of this duality is a joke. It's a lie. It's not really 100%. And they wanted to coalesce and condense the two poles down together back into the singularity of the void, and to become, as the void, the God again, the emptiness that is the God. Then maybe that's what they wanted. Maybe it's more subtle than that. Maybe it's they already know they're that, and they just having a good time experiencing this vivid world. Maybe this is a vacation for them.
Let me throw a thought out for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of the way I look at it. So, like in the Black Tower and stuff, some of the stuff I work with, some of the imagery and things, I use ancient Babylonian, Sumerian depictions, drawings where they show these halupa trees, and they show these bird-headed beings with pine cones touching the tree and stuff, and so forth and so on. Now, what was shown to me, how this was explained, and like I said, it's like you're sitting there describing, this is something that they slowly unlock to you, the thing is that you have these different, not necessarily ranks, because it's not like a totem
Yeah, I
pole.
don't like rank, but go on. Yep.
Yeah. But every single one of them have a role that they play. For example, the Watchers, which are by far my favoriteest. Uh, the Watchers watch over the development
Mm-hmm.
of the human race.
Yep.
So anything external that would come in and would impede that, or would stop that, or would impose it, that's why they're there, to help guide it and direct it. And then you have, like you said, your guardians, guides. The guides, they guide you along the path to where you find the things that are fit for you at your stage of evolution of becoming individually. And then you have your guardians, which they watch over you individually. Uh, and then there's this thing called the it's a greater mind. I think it's called super consciousness.
Mm-hmm. The collective
And
unconscious, like from Jung, you mean? Something like that?
yeah. And what happens is, this is the greatest form of conscious development that, conceptually speaking, can be attained to, or garnered, or gained, or whatever the word is for it. And what it is that's what they're calling the God self. This is where the HGA and the Holy Daemon and all this stuff, whatever word you're using for it comes from, is you're developing this consciousness within your already set consciousness.
Yeah.
And it's not something that you create. It is something that has been being created since the beginning. And so, coming back round to my point about those beings, tending to the trees, think of humanity, think of the world that we live upon, this earth, as a gigantic garden, which mimics theirs most perfectly. And they are the tenders, the shepherds of the flock, if you will. They take care of the trees, and we are the trees, humanity is. And so they're constantly working with and building and creating and shaping and shifting and so forth and so on. And so we're being tended to by these beings. Now, we're not going to get off into the whole whether we're being used, whether, ancient aliens, inserted certain DNA, so we'll always be their slaves. I'm not alien overlord crap. That's another person's channel, but not mine.
Possible, no thanks.
Yeah, right. It's somebody else's cup of tea, not mine.
Right.
But the thing is that what has happened is that we are developing beyond where we were. And I like how in your video where you talk about, like, all of a sudden it was like we developed intelligence.
Mm-hmm. That's probably getting into that biophotonic thing that I was mentioning before, because at some point the human mind clicked on, okay, so to speak. And you can see this. Let me give you an allegory. Let me give you a metaphor. Let me give you a comparison. When a newborn is born, okay, what do you see when you look in your eyes? You see the light of a consciousness that doesn't know how to express, interact, or understand what it's dealing with yet.
Yeah.
It's just, right, the whole time. And then as it starts to understand it, it gets less and less excited, right?
Sensory overload.
It gets overload, right? But it starts to get, as its brain forms, as the neural pathways form, it becomes more aware and more conscious. Then when I say conscious, I don't mean conscious like aware conscious. I mean more sophisticated in its sentience. It can now think thoughts, say words.
Hungry.
Yeah, it now knows fire hot, right? Why do you, I mean, these entities, they don't know fire is hot, because in their experience, when they first enter this human form, fire isn't hot. Fire is just this thing, right?
Yeah.
In the astral. So when this human entity, when this possession occurs early on in the child's development, you can almost think of it as we are being possessed by, I don't want to say a demon, but we are being possessed by a spirit. Somewhere either in the womb or just after, somewhere at some point, there's enough of this hardware that is aligned with this sentience that it starts to act in accordance with the sentience, okay? You could almost consider it like a drone or a avatar or maybe that's not even the best way to put it, because it might not be exactly like that. But in that would probably be the best comparison that I could come up with in our modern.
Some think of it as when you take your first breath, that you're breathing in that's when the actual spirit enters in.
My problem with that is that's putting a physical Not that they are not connected, because I'm the first person to tell you the physical and the spiritual are 100% connected. When you do Kundalini, okay, you have to do bodily movements and exercises, or else it doesn't do jack. If you you can do the Satnam thing, and you have to do the breathe in, you have to clench. There's a reason for that. You're aligning your body, mind, and spirit together in one action, and this causes the manifest to happen, the change, the Kundalini energy to blow up through your body. That's what causes it. Okay, if you just do one of them, you could get it, but it's going to go. Try riding a bicycle with only one wheel. It's kind of like what you're doing. So in the same sense, yes, that breath could be the first act of that being taking control of his experience. Because before that, if it is in the body, right, it's at the mercy of its mother, more or less. It can move its arms and stuff like that. But that is the first act it takes that it now it knows it's in control of this body fully. Because now there's no longer anyone making it breathe, making its heart pump, and the blood flow and also the stuff. So now it's like, okay, now I'm in control, because breathing is an interesting bodily function, because it's one of the core functions of our body that is both intentional and autonomic. Yeah. You can not think about it and you will breathe. Someone could, as long as you have the right part of your brain left, you will breathe whether you have a brain or not. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You don't have to think about it, or you can take control over it for a little while. It's kind of like this. Okay. So this breath, if you want to think of it that way, but to say it's the air, that the air coming into your lungs is what causes it, or that there's a spirit in the oxygen in the atmosphere, doesn't ride right with me. There's something to me that's too material, too separate, too. I'm not saying, I don't want to say they're wrong, because it's just taboo in our culture of the occult to just be like, you're wrong. But in my experience, that doesn't add up. It doesn't sound right. When you have this moment of parturition, and the human body comes out of the mother and it starts to live on its own, I like to think of it as there's someone waiting for a loading screen to finish, and the loading screen finishes and they don't know what the fuck to do because they don't know the controls. And so somebody slaps them and they go, oh, I get it. Yeah. That's how I breathe. Okay. And they still don't understand the shapes that are around them. This is a Rorschach ink blot, my friend. Yeah. Everything you're experiencing is a Rorschach ink blot from the moment you're born. And you start associating these shapes with concepts that you draw up and pull down from the astral, because that's where the concepts are. Dog doesn't exist in the real world, but the idea of a dog you can pull down from the astral and say, that's what a dog would be. So you are experiencing this material world, and that blob, that big dark blob over there becomes mom, and that other blob becomes dad, and that harsh deep sound is dad, and that light beautiful sound is your mother, and all these other things. You start making these associations, and you start connecting the dots, and you start forming a picture. Okay, that's how the consciousness in your body develops. But this is also your astral spiritual body becoming aware of the material world, because before that, this spirit sees everything as just a gradient of energy. It doesn't see it the way we see it, and it can still interact with it. But when you are sitting here, when I'm saying this is my glass of scotch, the entities goes, what's scotch? Initially, they don't know what scotch is. Not the way you do. Now, some of these entities like the Watchers do, because they've been interacting with us for thousands and thousands of years. They're aware of our culture, and they enter us from time to time when you do an invocation, when you do a possession. I said in my video, one of the greatest things you can do as an offering is to invoke them into you and share the offering together, because then they get to feel it. When they settle their presence on this outside of you, they're still sucking up the energy and the idea of what it is, and they appreciate it, and it still matters to them. But when you say, come into me, and then now they're experiencing that. They feel the heat down your throat. They feel the sense of the alcohol. They know what it's like, and that's what they're after. Just like that's what you were after when you first tuned in.
And
go ahead.
Isn't it interesting what you're talking about with like the concept of, on this planet there's no such thing as a dog, but from the astral down, it's like, oh, that's what a dog would be.
Right.
Isn't it interesting that the things that we see upon this plane, we experience it, we see it, we think it's this, and so forth and so on. And these are things that we've come to terms with, that we've accepted. And yet at the same time, turn the other direction. There are times when I've worked on the astral plane that I'm sitting there going, what the fuck am I looking at?
These are simple ideas you haven't had yet. Yeah.
First time I ran across the what they call the creeping, crawling chaos, the world destroyer, the very first thought went through my head was, what am I looking at? Because It was so freaking huge. I had no idea why. I was looking at it just like a portion, and like a portion. I don't even think like I can literally hold up like, that's what I was seeing. My eyes were like, I'm like, what is this? And then all of a sudden, it's like taking a step back and looking up and going, oh shit, I need to get out of this place, because as soon as you enter into that place, all of a sudden you're food.
Yeah.
Because on an animalistic level, its only concept is the self-preservation. And of course, all things in nature, exist through consumption. And so like all of a sudden it's like, ooh, that looks a little bit more tastier than what I've been eating on.
I like to look at it not as consumption, but as becoming.
Right.
So when you are consumed, you become the thing that consumes you.
Yeah.
This can be an upward motion or a downward motion if you think about it, but you become the thing that's consuming you.
Well, the same thing is taught in spiritual predatorialism. It's not necessarily that we as humans like eat cow and, we're cow. But if you think about it, when you die, your essence that decays, grows the plants. What do you think the cow's eating?
Right. You become one another. Okay.
Yeah.
When you eat the cow becomes you.
Yeah.
And it all serves a purpose. This is why, like, I get a kick out of people getting mad about meat eating. I'm like, you don't understand. If they didn't want to be eaten, they wouldn't be a cow. You know what I mean? I know that sounds horrible, but that's because they don't understand this concept of how entities just move through the system of life.
Yeah.
This is what you have to picture. It is a wave of life, and they move through it. And the life is what's moving through the system. And the wave is the little bits and blobs of living tissue that come and go up and down. They rise and fall. Every little cell in your body is being consumed by something right now. There's a war going on inside your body at every minute of every day. And if it stopped, you die. The moment that war stops, you die. Don't ever forget that. Like, if you get rid of all the bacteria in your body that are hurting you, your body will kill itself. It's a known fact. So go ahead.
And then we can take it right back in line with what you're talking about so that we stay on subject, because I literally am trying to keep this in line.
It's impossible.
It's not impossible. You just got to do the damn thing. So keeping that in mind and coming full circle with this so that we can continue as we were. So this experience of visualization of what we see and what we don't see and so forth and so on and all this. And in this experience that we're having or not having, at the same time, with everything that we've discussed, also then go right back full hand and think. And this is what brought me to the idea of that we exist in the Garden of the Gods, is the fact that, we're being tended to by these beings.
You're
and
a dreamer.
At the same time, we're becoming these beings. By proxy, I think is the term for that.
Well, I think of it, I don't like to say we're becoming. See, the thing is, we're still making a value judgment about what's better or worse. When we say we're becoming something, when we say we're becoming a watcher or what we're really doing is saying that we think we're inferior. We're not. Okay. We still have that inferiority complex that is built into our biology. That's kind of hard. And it's part of our upbringing. It's hardwired because of our biology requires that we be inferior for a while before we become superior. So we learn this behavior of I am inferior. When you reach a level, even a modest level of capability as a sorcerer, you stop thinking that way entirely, or at least a little bit. You stop thinking I'm inferior. I can do anything I want. Doesn't matter if I'm fat, ugly, bald, or stupid. I can do whatever I want because I'm in control. Okay, that's you start to realize I am the boss. I am in control. I am powerful. So this idea that we're becoming like them, I don't like. I think it's more along the lines of we are having this experience because this is the experience we wanted to have in the first place. We wanted to put ourselves, and what we're trying to do is, what is the point of any experience? What's the point of a dance? Why do we do anything? It's to enjoy the experience itself. Okay. I like to think of us as we're dreamers in the Garden of Eden. We just ate the apple, metaphorically speaking. Eve just handed us an apple. We just fell asleep. And now we're dreaming this pathetic existence that we think is pathetic, but it's really the coolest dream we've ever had. We're high as a kite in the Garden of Eden right now. You can think of it that way.
That's some good shit, man.
You could think of it that way. Now, that one thing that I think we need to get into is that the biophotonic consciousness idea, because since we are going on all these tangents, let's bring it back to the other thing you wanted me to talk about, because I think that's a key when we're talking about this idea that we are not a robot, but we are, I don't like to say a vehicle for an intelligence. I I think a conduit or an extension of, or I once had a dream, right, where I was standing on water or something. It was a clear liquid that I was walking on somehow. And everybody around me, we were all talking to each other. And something happened, and I got pulled down under the water. And as I got pulled down under the water, I realized that everybody around me was actually on the end of a stalk, the stalk of like a tentacle of some kind, like a creature. And so was I. And I looked down, I realized I'm part of this tentacle thing. And as I went down deeper, it's pulling me down deeper and deeper. I saw all the tentacles were connected to the same sleeping entity at the bottom of the ocean. Okay, that was a long time ago I had this dream.
Wow.
And so as I had this moment, I said, holy shit. And that's kind of like one of the dawnings of the non-dualism that I practice, okay?
Yeah.
Is this idea that we are all the same conscious, dreaming ourselves as a different thing to have fun. Okay, this is an experience for us. These guardians are just these other watchers are just other ends of tentacles just experiencing itself. But you could also imagine that your body is a little bit like that. I don't like when I say, like, when I die, I don't like to say I go anywhere. I don't think that's what happens. I don't think I go anywhere. I think I just stop focusing on this little tiny blob and I realize that I am everything around me. Or at least I am everything in the astral. I am an astral entity that is not.
You're awakening on another consciousness.
Right. I am non-local. The moment I die, I wake up and go, oh, I'm not local. I'm not this guy. Okay. I'm whatever I want to be. You know what? That guy over there looks cool. Let me try him out for a while. You know, maybe I settle up with the Guardians. Maybe Azazel's like, dude, you know how many times I had to call you before you picked up? You owe me. You know. Maybe that's what happens. I'm being flippant, but there's something to this. You know, every culture has their idea of you know, you die and you go somewhere. Well, what if you don't go anywhere? What if that's not what happens? So this gets into the biophotonic thing, because this theory goes, it's actually, I don't know if it's new, but it's newly emerging back on the scene again. Scientists have discovered throughout the years that our biology, our cells, give off photonic light. They give off photons, okay? Just by the natural processes that happen within them. The thing is that these photons, they run the spectrum, but there's also a very large amount that is in the visible spectrum. In fact, most of it's in the visible, if not all of it's in the visible spectrum. So that means somewhere from 200, I believe, to 1500 millihertz or whatever it is of electromagnetic radiation. So everything from infrared to somewhere in the ultraviolet. Our cells, as we do what cells do, they give off these little pings of light that come out. And certain cells in nature, like a germ, or I think they said a rat's cells, give off maybe a dozen of them an hour. Well, our neurons in our brain give off millions upon billions of these photons, enough that you can detect them much more easily with a sensitive enough sensor. So they're saying, well, what purpose would all of this light glow have? It's not necessary for the function of the cells. It's not, you know, it could just be because of the way the mitochondria, you know, does what it does with sugars and it breaks it down. But there seems to be more to it, because it seems to be also received by the cells around it. And when cells are not experiencing this light, when other parts of your body aren't experiencing this light, they don't cooperate the right way. So they did experiments where they took plants, and I believe it was onion plants, and they put them growing side by side in a lab, and everything was controlled. So there was no way to have the wrong lights hitting them and all this other stuff. And they put a piece of crystal or glass or something between them that would allow the light to properly penetrate. When they did that, the plants grew wildly. They grew up together. They aimed for each other. They came together, and they tried to kind of what they do in the wild, and they tried to grow together to become together for protection or whatever it is, whatever reason they have. And when they put the opaque screen between them, they didn't do that anymore.
Yeah, they stayed separated.
Right. And there was no other reason for this. It was an open air situation. So if it was a chemical thing, they still would have picked up the chemical and reacted. Maybe they would have tried to grow around it to reach the other one or something, because they would have been attracted to the smell, I guess you could say. Yeah. But this seemed to have to do with light. And they did a lot of similar experiments with other organisms. And they do seem to believe that, especially in the case of our brains, because our brains, the neurons in our brains, compared to the cells in your finger, are glowing like a candle flame. I mean, they're glowing, okay? Maybe not to your eyes. If you looked at a brain, it won't glow to you. But if your eyes are a little bit more sensitive and could pick, maybe they were really big, you might be able to pick up this light. You might be able to see it. And there are some people who are noticing patterns in how this works. When you have an anesthetologist, someone who knocks you the hell out when you get your teeth pulled or something like that, they can monitor your brain and see when your consciousness goes away and when it comes back. And this one woman in particular, I can't remember her name, but she does a TED talk about it. She notices that it's really unique because it's not appearing to be a product of the brain, this consciousness. Rather, there is some kind of synchronistic activity that happens between the neurology of the brain and something else. Almost like when you're tuning your dial on your radio to get a signal. You're going a little bit this way, a little bit that way, and then boom, you got it and you lock into it. The human brain does a similar thing as it's waking up, as it's becoming aware again, as your consciousness materializes again. There is this, at least apparent, whether this is factual or not, I don't want to say I'm a skeptic, but I'm a rational person.
Right.
I don't like to just jump to conclusions and say this is what's happening. I could be imagining everything that's happening with Azazel. I don't necessarily believe that I can make the claim for everybody in the world that I'm speaking to this entity and this is the truth and you have to believe it. I don't buy that. This is something.
I believe you're experiencing it, and that's good enough for me.
Right, exactly. Because you and I have this sorceress mindset that subjective experience is not, irrelevant.
Others cannot judge it because it's not in their worldview. Therefore, they themselves have no validity to say yay or nay.
Right. And in this worldview, you also have this idea of the subjective and objective world, that we view the objective world through a subjective lens. So you can have the most ardent skeptic, but you can't get him to prove that his experience is any more real than yours, okay? Or any less real than yours. He can't prove, you still have to make the assumption. Like with Occam's razor, there's still an assumption you have to make that this objective experience is shared. And not all of us share it, okay? Not all of us experience it the same way. It's kind of impossible. We're all coming at it from different directions. And anyone who has a slight deviation from that objective truth is labeled lunatics and crazy. I don't think they're crazy. I think they just have a different wavelength. They just see things differently. Well, anyway, this is partially going back to this antenna consciousness thing.
And I want to jump in there before we get to that part.
Okay.
Before we get to that part. Because I like that. But, okay, so interjecting here. So in the aspect of this biophoton, this point of view that maybe isn't rationalized, logical. No, it's made logical.
It's still a theory. It's still a very broad theory. They don't know for sure, but this is an interesting idea. Go on.
I think this is funny because in your video you're talking about, you were like, and here I am, I've spent all night, researching, and I'm up at 4 a.m. making a video. The same thing happens to me a lot of the times. Earlier I was reading about the 9 parts of the soul according to the ancient Egyptians, and I was sitting there and I was like, all these different parts and pieces and stuff, Hey, you take the tree of life, and I'm not going to get into that, but I'm just making a point.
Find correlations.
The very top point, which is the 10th sphere, Malkut, that's the crown kingdom, whatever, or the crown.
You can have them all line up to chakras and stuff.
Yeah. But those different parts of the soul could align to the different sephira of the rest of the tree. And that's what they're talking about, is that those parts of those portions are connected to that divine, and that's why they show them as distinctly separate and different. And then when we take into account what you're talking about with the biophotons, this makes a lot of sense when they say in Hermeticism, I believe, is it Hermeticism, something like that, where they're talking about the all is mind, the mind is all.
Yeah, that's Hermeticism. Yeah, the mind. I think it's the first of the Hermetic principles.
The very first one. Second one is duality, so forth and so on. But the one that I'm thinking of is the one where they're talking about. I really just got confused for a second. Anyway, so all these different parts and pieces and things, and how we're all connected. Not necessarily you and I, but all these different parts of soul.
We are, but go on. Yeah, the separation's an illusion. But go on. Like, remember that dream I had? We're looking at each other like these little tentacle monsters, going, "I'm not you," but down at the bottom we are. Okay, but go on. Right?
Exactly. But one of the most interesting concepts that I thought of is, what if with the all being mind and the mind being all, and everything in the universe is electric. Because I honestly do believe that, whether it's a biochemical thing, whether it's a static elemental thing, whether, it's things rubbing against one another, whatever the concept is, it's all electric. I did agree with the universe as electric.
Well, there's different. I don't want to get too off onto that tangent. And science is one of the things that I was into for a long time. I know exactly what they say it is.
Well, I wasn't going to go off.
But go on.
I wasn't going to go completely off into that, but I mean,
charge. That's the duality you're talking about. Charge, positive and negative. Mind is everything. Mind creates charge out of what it sees. Positive and negative. That's the electric. There's your electric thing, your duality. And go on.
Well, and that was my point though about biophotons, is that for whatever reason, whether theory or not, it can still be applied. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I agreed on was the importance of imagination. Me personally, and this might sound really out there somewhere, but I believe that the universe was created from a state of play, period, in the story.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's really hard to explain to people because they look at it and go, the universe was made out of play. It's like, well, yeah, it's got to come from the mind, a thought, and it was something that was having fun with an idea. It had to be. And not in the sense of what we think of as fun, but like how you have all these different cells.
What would a god find fun?
Right? They might be like, hey, let's poke this and see what it does. Because I like to push buttons till I figure out which one does the thing I want it to do.
Yeah.
Some people might look at me like, dude, you need to get educated. Me, I'm like, you need to shut the hell up and let me have fun. And in that sense, I can see, the universe was created out of play.
There's a video called the Meaning of Life in, I think, 9 minutes or something like that. Yeah. It starts off with a dot. You watch that video. I think I shared it with you once a long time ago, but if you haven't had a chance, find it and watch it because that's pretty much what you're talking about. But go on.
Right. And so, like I was saying, though, that we can take that, whether theory or not, and as sorcerers, we can take that and run with that, and and we can incorporate it safely, because as long as we understand what the concept is, and that not to take it too seriously.
Never take anything too seriously. Play the game seriously, though. It's like Monopoly. You play to fucking win, brother, but when it's over, you hug your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your girlfriend, whatever, and you shake hands and you say, that was a great game. But
yeah, after you do your little happy dance beating their asses.
Right. Beat their ass. But but don't take the game too seriously. Take the play seriously.
I was trying to remember that rap song. Fuck the game, don't let the game fuck you.
That's right. Fuck the game. Smack that board up.
Smack that bitch's ass. Well, I mean, what? Wrong game. But oh shit, man. Okay, but anyway, so we take that and we apply it. The luminescence, the light, like for example, certain spirits, man, they just like, I can see where the concept of angels coming from, and where people are like, oh, it was this bright, brilliant light, and it was the light of God, and blah blah blah. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, no shit. If you were that in tune with, if you were on that plateau of self-empowerment, you would glow like that too. Every man and every woman is a star.
That's actually one of the things that this theory speaks about, is that it is possible, if we take this theory maybe too far in the scientific sense, but in our world it makes more sense. We take it to its full conclusion, is that maybe people who are holy do glow. Maybe that's the last step before they poof and disappear and become just light, or they leave their body completely. They're no longer in their body. Boom, 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 boom. But this idea of light, the idea goes that it's not just that it's photons, it also has to do with quantum entanglement, because certain particles, as I'm sure you're aware, everybody who likes supernatural stuff loves quantum physics and loves particles, and quantum entanglement. Everybody becomes a particle physicist when they start getting into the supernatural sometimes, it seems. This idea of quantum entanglement applies to photons very strongly, in fact. So there is this idea that this photonic array that's going on in your brain, okay, all these photons that are whizzing around, hitting the other cells, influencing how they're acting, because you can influence the way they're acting, they believe, by the way of these visible signals. Like they're literally blinking at each other, not just with electricity, but with light, and communicating that way as well. that because this seems to have such a photonic aspect to it, that it is theoretically also possible that these photons could be quantum entangled with another photon on the other side of the universe, and we're being puppeted theoretically even by something else. In that sense,
cause and effect.
Right. But you could have an instantaneous communication between your conscious and another conscious if this is true. Or they could be the same conscious, really, that is expressed in two places. Or
you talk to yourself.
Well, yeah, that too. I like to think of it more as, when we look at like planetary alignments and the sun, and this is why all these things could matter. We say, oh, Jupiter or Saturn has been coming up a lot lately for me because I'm working with Azazel. Saturn's alignment and this, that, and the other thing. Saturn, the light from why would that matter? This is a planet. Why are planets gods and deities, right? Let's be scientific for a minute. We know why in history. We know why in our occult studies that people believe these things. But why scientifically could this be valid? Why could it be possible? Is it right to say that a planet has a soul and that's what's doing things like Saturn is somehow more powerful than us because it's the whole planet?
No. If you're looking at it from a scientific point of view, you have to take into account that large bodies like that, whatever body there is, creates to its own self, its own form of gravity, and its own gravity actually affects other things' gravity. In return, it's a trickle effect. Right.
But now let's go into this photonic thing, okay?
Okay.
You have the light of the sun hitting Saturn and reflecting back to us, and the way that Saturn influences that light could be the spiritual entity of Saturn, okay? Okay, so in other words, why do we have to face the correct direction? Why are the eyes the window to the soul? Why is you face the direction of Saturn when you do your working? You are taking the full blast of Saturnian light into you on all the wavelengths that it produces.
Yeah.
And why does it matter when it's above the horizon versus below? When I do certain things, if it calls for a certain phase of the moon, I prefer to have it high in the sky when I do it, as high as possible. You can do it when it's below the horizon, but I get a muted effect. Same thing with a star or anything else. The more those lights shine on you, the more of an effect they seem to have.
Yeah.
Could this correlate? Could there be a correlation? I think so.
I believe it.
Is it the gravity? If it was just the gravity, then it wouldn't matter where it is, which that could explain why it still works.
Well, think of it this way. Okay, so the moon reflects the light of the sun. According to science and all this other stuff.
Everything reflects the light of the sun, right?
Right, exactly. Well, if you think about it in a really weird way, we are the great mimickers. We're chameleons. Mm-hmm. We can take any form, any shape, any density, any whatever. All we have to do is to know its energy signature, and we can copy it most perfectly. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, the reason why something like that would have to be high above us is because that makes the most optimal time what they consider the opening of the gates, the doors, or whatever. At any rate, that's the power at its apex. You're able to tap into it. You become that power. It's so much easier than trying to.
Let me interject again with this idea of like a radio, okay, with like a cell phone. You probably are aware that radio is just another form of light. Radio waves is just a high frequency of light that is moving at a frequency that's too fast for our eyes to see.
Yeah.
But an antenna picks it up because it interacts with the metal of the antenna and it picks it up. Okay. When you have a bad signal, what do? You go outside, you hold your phone up so that it catches more direct line of sight with that tower. So when we're having especially an invocation, okay, with this entity or communication with an entity that is associated with that astral object, okay, this could be why it's important to have it in direct conjunction with our eyes. In other words, we have to be able to feel it because the light's hitting our body and our nerve endings are in here picking that up. We're seeing it. It's very subtle to our visual senses, but our cells may be very sensitive to this light. This is why even on a cloudy night, if I'm doing a ritual to something and it's a cloudy night, it can influence it too. I like a nice clear night, when I can really see that new moon or the full moon. I can feel it, right? Now, I still do most of the stuff I do in my home, but that's a much smaller barrier than we think. The light still gets through to a certain extent. But, or as we were talking before, you don't always have to see it, but it mutes it. Why do you think most things were done, in the ancient times? Almost every ancient society needed to know, for agricultural purposes, of course, the the patterns of the stars in the sky. They had to know the sun's going to rise here on a certain day of the year. I need to know when that is so I can plant my crops. But it's
this
also
flower will only grow in the sun. If
right.
it's always shadowy, it's not going to grow.
Right. And so you have that, but then there's also, if you look, and you are obviously aware of this, every primitive culture, when they're praising their gods and when they're doing this, that, and the other thing, isn't it always outside in the open?
No.
Isn't it always following some kind of an alignment? You know, what cultures don't do that? And ask yourself this question. It's usually the modern ones, and it's usually the ones that are very, shall we say, Abrahamic. They like to be inside when they do their things, don't they? But these other cultures, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Mayans, all these other, the Egyptians, everybody liked, they had an outdoor element to what they did. They had an alignment of the stars. They have that whole thing in the pyramids. They have the tube that would align with the stars at a certain time of the year, and the light would hit the king's tomb or whatever at that, there's a reason for that. They believe that the light, if you look in the culture of the Egyptians, wasn't it all based on the stars, and the casting of the Milky Way was the semen of whatever, and you have all these. This light is the key, is absolutely the key in how it happens, and light was really the first. If you want to go scientifically speaking, light was the first thing to appear after substance. So in other words, you have the Big Bang, you have all this stuff forming, it's really fucking hot, but there's no light because it's too dense. You have a substance, and then as it expanded, the first thing that happened was light. Let there be light was the first thing that happened, but there was already a void there in the Bible. There was already the still waters, right? The empty darkness. It was dark, but it was really fucking hot. And then you had light was the first thing that happens. Well, light, one could say, I'm getting into some really, far out science fiction fantasy stuff.
I'll go ahead. I'm going to join you in a minute.
Have you ever heard of a Boltzmann brain?
Yes.
Okay. Theoretically, that first moment of light could have been the birth of a Boltzmann brain that we would consider the first consciousness that made everything else happen the way it happened. It might have been sitting there in this expanding heat and darkness and going, well, what happens if I poke this and poke that, and it starts to create a reality around it that expands into the universe, and it is still there because all that light is still traveling in the universe. Okay, all of it.
Yeah, and the infinity loop.
Right, and it may get absorbed into things, but it's constantly expanding out into reality. It's always still there. You can see it everywhere in the universe. If you look with the right telescope, with the right wavelength, you can see the cosmic background radiation. That first light that emerged is still there to be seen by all. Yeah. Okay. So it's still there. Okay. This could be that mistaken for God entity. Okay. Because I don't like to me, the word God is too loaded. I don't like to use the word God. Just like demons is too loaded for some people. You know what I mean? It's too loaded with the stratification of better, worse, higher, lower. I don't like that. Duality makes a certain sense, but stratification I don't like. It bothers me on a certain level. But you go ahead and interject now that I said that a little bit.
Okay.
Take over for a little bit. I need to drink.
There you go. A while back I did a video on the Sumerian Mesopotamian deities being aligned around agriculture. Because a lot of people don't understand that the ancient people, where the idea or concept of deity or any of that came from, was natural elements and powers and forces in the universe surrounding them affecting this life, this world. And so, there was born the first gods and so forth and so on, and they were more analogies than actual deities. It just over time they developed and actually became a thing, like in the sense of, and not that they did not exist on their own naturally, but it was processed through what is known as the human consciousness and given form, aka egregores, masks, whatever you want to call them.
You're an egregore. You're the universe's egregore.
No shit, right? And I'm gonna leave that part right there. But with the concerning the Bozeman brain, and I don't know why I keep wanting to call it another name. That's neither here nor there. But anyway, so the concept works like a wave. Okay, like for example, you got a pond. drop a pebble in it, waves, ripples, whatever you want to call it. Well, now they've shown that, despite objects being in the way of the wave still continues on the other side. And in a sense, that's how, in your analogy and the way you're describing it, this is how it can continue no matter, the mass and so forth and so on. And this explains earlier when we were discussing it, it wasn't that I was being non-dualistic with it or wasn't explaining it to the degree, but maybe it was a choice of bad words.
Because it's just a choice of words, man. That's what it always boils down to. It's a choice of words because we don't have any other option. You can't just, how can we have this conversation unless we pretend it's a dualistic thing?
Exactly, right?
You can't.
And and it's when you talk about becoming, what I honestly mean is evolution. Evolution is always occurring. It never stopped. It wasn't like it's already evolved as far as it's going to evolve and it'll never evolve any further. We're just dreaming a dream of what was happening while it was being.
You have to have constant change. You have to have constant change or the dream ends. And evolution is often a loaded term for other people, not me because I'm well versed in science. But evolution is often a loaded word too because it for most people, maybe not you, but it implies a certain elevation, growth, building.
Yeah.
But evolution, humans have this quirky nature that the first thing we like to do is categorize, but then we like to decide which category is better than the other. Reality doesn't have a better or worse. This is why when I say the astral is ideas without ideals. So in other words, all ideas are equal. There is no good or bad. There is no better or worse. There's no hot or cold. The word exists, but this hot as a better or worse experience doesn't exist. This idea that there is more evolution or less, or that evolution is growing towards something or anything like that is a completely flawed understanding of the word evolution. Evolution is in any system, the natural progression of complexity through entropy, okay, to create the most median empty state of energy. That's a lot of freaking word salad right there. But what we're basically describing is fire is part of entropy like evolution is part of entropy. Evolution is a way for reality to disperse the energy of our environment, but hold on to it for a little bit longer to get the last drop of it out that it can. Yeah. Living things are really efficient at sucking the energy out of environments efficiently. We don't realize it, but we are. Yeah. So we break down matter in a way that other systems and methods don't.
Yeah.
So evolution is just a continuation of that process. As the chemicals interact, as the cells interact, as the DNA interacts, and light hits it, ultraviolet light changing the DNA and all this other stuff, we get mutations. We're not advancing towards anything. There's no advance. There is simply a continuum of change. Yeah. And you're going to have ups and downs on the continuum. That's why I said the thing about the pendulum to you the other day. When we're talking about balance. A perfectly balanced system is dead. That means it's sitting like this. Yeah. A pendulum swings, and that can be balanced also, but it's balanced in the aggregate. Well, evolution works in the same way. You have ups and downs, and you have extinctions, and you have new creations, and you have this going on. There is no apex evolution. It doesn't work that way. So when we're saying we're evolving or growing or building towards something, I think that's a mistake that we make because we, coming from our forced inheritance of being a little child that has to be submissive to a greater, bigger creature, and we have to become that creature. Everything we see and understand is couched and framed in this idea of growth because that's our biology talking. Yeah. Biology is saying, I need to get bigger and fucking stronger, or I need to get smarter or whatever. But evolution doesn't care. Evolution just wants to make sure that you live long enough to pop one nut in the right girl and and that's all that matters to evolution. Yeah. This is why your body is only designed to be healthy until about 20 years old or so. After that, everything starts to go in terms of your teeth fall out and everything if you don't take care of it. Yeah. So evolution doesn't care about all this, like becoming a super being. It really doesn't.
It's a continuation of the species.
Right. And it doesn't even care about that. It's just, it's a domino. You have to think of it like a domino game. When you flick the thing, it just goes. And the complexity is there because it's already there. And it's the first domino is like that first cell. And it falls and it goes and it goes and it goes. And then it splits because it just happens to split there. It's not because it's better or worse. You know, the most successful organisms on the planet are single-celled organisms. In a way,
Yeah.
they're more advanced than we are because they've already made it. Insects are more advanced than we in many respects.
You know, I'm glad you said that because, you know, I'm reminded of, I think when I was in school, they were talking about the, what was it, the cosmic soup or the sludge or something from which all life crept up out of the oceans for. My favorite thought was I think of the Milky Way. Uh, and I think of how it's just this huge freaking belt or area or space or whatever you want to call it that all these objects are floating in. And when I think of, you know, a science teacher trying to explain to me how all life on Earth was created from this sludgy soup crawled out of the ocean, I'm sitting there and like, and the Earth crawled out of the soupy sludge called the Milky Way. Gotcha, chick.
Yeah.
But the thing is that,
remind me of that in a minute, by the way. Keep going with your thought, but remind me of that in a minute. I want to talk about something. Go ahead, because I tend to forget. That's why I interrupt a lot. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, same here. But the thought that I had though behind that wasn't necessarily that, but like in magic, when you're talking about, you know, the tree of life and the tree of death, or, you know, the clip off and so forth and so on. There are two realms. There's you have the astral and you have the abyss. Now I know there's more than that. I'm not trying to get into that, but the way I like to think of it is that, you know, everybody's like, you know, oh, you got to go into the abyss and blah blah blah, and, you know, and you got people it's like you got to go into the astral and all this that and the other. Well, like you were talking about earlier about the objective and subjective, this is where it all connects. Is in the astral and the abyss. In the abyss are the shells, the husks, the cast-offs, the stuff that just didn't make the cut. And in the astral, you still have the right thoughts, the thoughts that are still occurring. And then where do those thoughts that didn't hold up, where they go? They go over there. But I like to think of the astral and the abyss being just like the Milky Way. And I think that when we combine the thought of being flesh and spirit as one, mind and spirit as one, our actions and interactions as being one and the same, you know, like to think a thought, to speak it, and to do it. You know, this trinity of force to cause manifestation, the causal, if you will. And I think that a lot of people just they don't get the importance of why you keep these things connected, why you keep them together, why you consider them one and the same. Because mankind is the only one that will sit there and, like you said, try to dissect that shit, stick it in a box.
And not just put it in a box, but then go like that and treat it like two separate things. That's not what's happening.
Exactly. So now let's get back with you with what you wanted me to remind you about that.
So just an interesting thought, you know, when you're talking about life crawling out of the sludge of the primordial soup of this world, if you ever do the math or have someone do it for you, like I would probably need, because math is not my strongest point. If you ever do the math on what would be required statistically for that to happen as we think it happened, it would take longer than the age of this universe times many thousands, okay? For if you kept randomly doing it every couple of microseconds or whatever.
And even if you got everybody on the earth involved in helping you.
Even if you had every single planet in the universe that could have life doing this at the same time imagine you have an entire universe full of planets and every single planet had the capability of producing life on it. All the materials were there. And you started from day one, and every second of every day you rolled the dice that decided life was going to start. It would take longer than the age of the universe multiplied many times. I'm talking not one, not 10, millions of times for the odds of this happening even once anywhere in the universe to happen. Yep. So if we go by just the random chance idea that life started here, then you enter this problem where it seems like not only is it improbable, but it borders on impossible.
Okay? Yeah, it didn't happen.
You're literally saying, you know, this idea you can have 100 monkeys typing in a room for 100 years, eventually they'll produce Shakespeare, something like that. Well, this is many, many orders of magnitude more difficult than even that. Just to get, and we're not even talking about life when we're doing this rolling the dice idea. We're talking about just getting one protein, one of the proteins that makes up life, not the whole soup, not the whole thing.
Yeah.
So this is why you have ideas like panspermia. This is why you have ideas where life comes from elsewhere and comes here. Science doesn't like that because all you're doing is taking the problem and putting it somewhere else. It doesn't. It wants to solve the problem. So the issue that we are getting at, again, is I don't like the idea of intelligent design just because as an scientifically minded person, it bothers me, but I can't refuse that does appear to potentially be, especially with what Azazel is telling me, that certain things could be influenced and designed. What is designing it? What is causing it? This is all these fundamental questions that are in the subjective realm right now, because even if it became objective, people would refuse it. If you and I came in the course of our conversation and decided, oh, this is where reality comes from, I got it right here, people would still have to watch this video and decide we were right. Okay, they're still living in their subjective experience. And this is why I often say, going back to Azazel again, when you're being taught something, it's up to you to learn it.
Yeah.
I can tell you something and you have to decide it's true or not. Your subjective decision is still what makes it real for you. That's that's the first hermetic principle of mind. You're deciding this is real, this is not. Mind is where it starts. So once we start to wonder where the mind comes from, we get a chicken and an egg scenario.
Okay.
Does the mind create these entities, or do these entities create the mind? And you can flip this around as many times as you want. This is why one becomes a non-dualist, because you start to realize, again, we're talking about more like a magnet that has two poles, and the two poles seem like they're not the same thing, but they are. They're part of one magnet. They just look opposite because they have an opposite charge, but they're still the same thing. It comes down to direction, and it comes down to intensity and volume and things like that. These weird fundamental ideas. And this is actually a big part of the book I'm writing, at least one of the most significant parts of it, even though it's not taking up the biggest portion of it, is the Trinity of Self. And what this really means is this origin of how the mind creates reality around you, including the astral, including the material, and what all of these different things are built out of, and why that matters in magic. So we'll have to do a video about that sometime. But
yeah, I'd like to do that.
I bring it up only because we brought up my Azazel video, because he mentioned that in he said to me, that's a good crutch. That's a good crutch. Like, he complimented it, but he also,
Yeah, when he called it a crutch, he noted its fallacy and how it was made just to keep you going for so long.
Right.
It's like, my Trinity of Self is Satan, Lucifer, and Iblis, and not necessarily in that order. But you have the black flame, you have the demonic flame, you have the demonic intelligence, and you have the demonic force of will. And when you swipe it all together, that's what it is. But in my head,
of all experiences, 3.
Yeah.
You have to have 3 for anything.
Isn't that funny? I've noticed that myself, and I've noticed that when I stick to that, my magic pops like crazy, just getting it to
3 is the holiest number. I mean, 3 is the holiest number. If you do numerology, 3 is the most important, significant number, then 6, then 9, blah, 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 blah. Or 3, 7, 9, whatever. You get these numbers. But 3, even Buckminster Fuller, the guy who I don't know if you've heard of him, but the guy who created the geodesic domes and all this kind of stuff, he said 3 is we'll look him up, Buckminster Fuller. 3 is the foundation of pretty much everything, because you need to have you and me, we can disagree. You need a third observer to create an objective.
Exactly. It's like in science class, you had your control, your base, so forth and so on.
Test, right.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that with that triplicity, I learned a long, long time ago when working with the runes, me having no knowledge, no teachers, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the runes and I'm sitting there going, I can use 1 and it's not really working right. I can use 2 and she gets fucked up. I bring 3 into the equation and I have a perfect balance.
Look at a tarot reading. Okay. You can do a single card. That's cool. I don't like to do just 1. If I do just 1, it's to add to something. My minimum is 3. I do a 3-card spread for whatever I'm doing. I don't even mess around with the big stuff most of the time. To me, a 3-card is enough to get me going. Sometimes a 4. And if I need a real full detailed one, sometimes I'll do that. But 3 is the minimum. You need the past, present, future. You need the self, the other, and the influence. You need all of these different things to work together. And the Trinity of Self, which I really would like to do a video on that at some point when I'm closer to doing my book, with you maybe. But this idea is of the mind, the body, and the spirit. Now, the body not being this body, but the body this. All of this is the body, all of it. Okay, mind, body, and spirit working as 3 different aspects. When they come together, they create an objective reality around us. And your mind is what takes ideas from the astral, from the spiritual, and overlays them over the material, the body, and gives them meaning. So this Rorschach ink blot you're looking at that doesn't have meaning by itself, it's just a bunch of random blobs. You go, oh, look, a kitty. Oh, look, a bird. Oh, look, my mom. You give it meaning with these astral concepts. You paste them on top of it. You create an overlay, a desktop overlay that comes from the spirit, you know. So this is, you know, mind is, if you're talking about in the Hermetic principle, mind is the source. For the human experience, it is the source. It isn't actually what everything is, but for the human experience, it absolutely is. For our personal subjective experience, the mind is what creates all of this out of these two disparate extremes, and puts them together and, look, I made a ball.
You have the different layers or levels. For example, and it's not getting back into it, but the tree of life, it has four barriers between it. You know, it's four levers: Asaya, Braya, Yetzirah, so forth and so on. Well, at any rate, each one is what you were just discussing, where you're talking about, you know, the mind is all, the all is mind. Well, its effects on this plane is one way. On the next level, it's another. On the next, another. So forth and so on. And it creates that vortex, that downward, that's that trinity.
Mm-hmm.
And
you get that trinity, and you also get, now I want you to think of one other thing, and this is why we'd have to do this in a whole, because I could spend hours talking about this alone. When you experience the astral realm, okay, when you go and you do an astral travel or an astral trance or whatever form you do it, I still can't astral travel, but I can get a really good astral trance going, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. When you experience this, what you're really doing is your analytical mind, okay, is experiencing the spirit, and it is taking those ideas and selecting the ones that it cares about, that make sense to it, and arranges them to tell a story that makes sense to it. So this is why when you and I look at the same entity in the astral level, in the astral world, we're not going to agree 100% on what it looks like, because we're creating a form for it based out of what we like and understand, but its essence will be agreed upon. You and I will both agree that thing looked evil, okay? Yeah. That's the part that, or that thing looked like a woman, or that, or whatever. You might see her with red hair, I might see her with brown hair. But what will matter is that the hair was nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These are the ideas that come through. So when we look at the astral and we see these worlds, these universes, and these different planes of the Qliphoth and the Seraph, you know, we see all these different things. This is, again, and you might laugh, this is, again, our human capacity in nature to take things that don't have boxes and make boxes around them so we can try to figure them out.
Yeah.
You know, the way to look at it is, I wouldn't say the Qliphoth has spheres, boxes, and all. So that's a diagram, so that we can understand it like a diagram of an atom. But if you ever saw an atom, it doesn't look like a diagram of an atom. It looks like a blur. It doesn't look like that.
Let me inject a little bit of humor. Imagine the first person to realize what was poison
these days. Go on.
Allow me to interject some humor.
Yeah.
Something that makes sense and fits in with what we're discussing. Imagine the first person to discover a certain berry was poisonous.
Yeah. Imagine the first person to suck on a cow titty. But you know what I'm saying. You got to have a first for everything, right?
Not the first time I sucked dick. It would not be the last.
But there has to be a. This goes into something else that's important to what we're talking about with this whole consciousness thing. This is where I marry magic and science, because I believe science is a manifestation of magic. That is to say, thousands and thousands of years ago, mankind said, I want to fly, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And because there's no way to bend the laws of physics to do that, magic said, okay, you know, and Azazel and all these other watchers came down and said, here's how you can do it using the natural laws. That's the magic. That's the manifestation of the magic. You know, people say, I want to do magic and fly. Well, you already are when you get on an airplane. That is the result of a magic spell that was cast 1,000 times by 1,000 different people in 1,000 different centuries.
Well, I look at you, and you and I, we've been friends for a while now, and you know, we're two totally different people. Most people they really don't realize that. Even if we can get on here and we're chatting, we're completely two different people. But one of the things that I am just fucking uber impressed with you is the fact that, and this ain't ass kissing or nothing like that, sticking you up on a pedestal. This is just, hey, prepare yourself, young man, prepare yourself. But the thing is that, you know, you took this system, you know, you working with these deities that you've been working with, you know, you picking yourself back up, going back into your practice and so forth and so on. There are people out there that have read way more than I have, and that's scary because I've read a lot of shit. And what's even scarier is that some of these people have practiced it too. You know, whereas everything I've read, if I've read it, I've actually put it to practice, actually tested it to make sure it was worth a fuck. But with you, you know, for the lack of the amount of stuff that you read, you've taken a very simple base, just concept, and you have worked your own natural will and your own desire. You have taken what is natural in you based on this design that you've created of, you know, non-dualism, and just, you know, and you've created it, you've crafted it, you brought it into your system. You then, in a really strange way, it's transformed those spirits, those entities, when they enter in through to your world, your universe, you've changed them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, because you are the way you are about things, because you're so fucking brutally honest and just, you know, show your true self, because I will always show my true self. The reason I know this is because I do the exact
what God does, doesn't it?
Well, I can say this because I do the exact same thing. And so when those things come through, guess what? They're not hampered by greed. They're not hampered by envy. They're not nothing like that. Instead, what they have is a pure soul that's emitting these signals and saying, "Come to me." And these spirits are showing up, and they're like, "Hey," you know, and then they're working with you, and then you're sitting there and you're having these experiences, and you get to, you know, describe and explain and all this, and a lot of things you can't say because a lot of these things, they're just for you.
They're just for me, or they defy language. One or the other. It's one of the other causes.
Man, I tell you what, like I put up a post in the Black Tower tonight that just seems just crazy as shit. But the thing about it is there's sometimes when words, they're about as useless as tits on a nun, dude.
Words are like the notes in a song by themselves. They're just boop. They don't mean anything. You have to put them together, and you have to feel the whole song. So getting back to what you said before about other practitioners, now, you know I'm a little arrogant, and I do enjoy being, you know.
Well, confidence is where it begins.
Right. But one of the things that I often speak to is a lot of people are book smart in magic, but they are spiritually dead. They're magically dead. I watch them do a ritual, and they're just literally, by the four forces of the such and so, you know, there's nothing going on there. I'm sorry. There's nothing. If I don't look at you either through a video or whatever and feel something coming off of you, you know, because I can just see the emotion, even if I don't even just see the emotion, I don't believe you're doing anything. That doesn't mean it doesn't work, by the way, because your subconscious can still take care of the rest for you. If you're going
to capture your attention, you're not going to get anything out of it.
You're just going through the motions, like reciting poetry but not knowing what it means, or, you know, you're doing Shakespeare, to be or not to be. You know, there's nothing in it. It's just words. Other people, you know, me, because when I was younger and I started developing along this path, number one, I didn't have the patience to read 1,000 books to figure it out.
Okay.
As you said, I came from a perspective of, I just had a few ideas that I knew had to be true. I knew they had to be true because there was just a voice telling me they were true. And I just kept working with them and developing them and hammering them out, kind of like you take a piece of clay and you just keep going and keep going. And next thing you know, you got something that's functional. Now, for me, I always, you know, when you quiet your mind, you quiet your voice, you quiet your body, and you just, there's no thoughts going on, you can still act 100%. And when I had that experience where I realized I didn't have to think or visualize or even decide to do something and make the right or wrong choice anyway, I realized, okay, all of this book stuff, all this other stuff is just thoughts. They're just other people's thoughts. I want to get to the nitty-gritty of what this is. I want to get to the nitty-gritty of what this is. And what I continually come back to over and over, that's why I said to you earlier, come back to over and over, is none of these things that we're doing in magic, personally, for me, and I know that people are going to disagree with this, necessarily do anything. They're more of a celebration of a thing that is already in motion. The only thing that you do in magic, in my opinion, is you align your intention, your will, and your experience to one, ultimate intention. So when you're working magic, you are kind of like you're separating a part of reality and you're pulling it up out of the system for a minute and you're twisting it and shaping it how you want it. Just a teeny piece, even if it's just this candle. If I pump my energy in this candle as hard as I can and decide that this candle is the candle that exists in the world where I get my will to happen, it's like I'm taking this candle from another timeline and pulling it into this one.
And you're putting it into the tapestry of fate.
I'm putting it down, and then the whole tapestry has to change at least a little bit to fit that new design, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So this is what's going on, but am I doing anything? Or am I celebrating a thing that's already been done? Because this is where it comes down to intention, always comes down to intention. Your intention happens before you do it. Your intention happens even before you decide to do it. If you clear your mind of all thoughts and you go get a soda, when did your intention start?
Way before that, when you decided you were thirsty.
You can go further than that, brother.
Well, I'd have no doubt of that.
You can go further than that. Where did your first intention happen? If you really want to play, if you want to be pedantic like I do, I love
back when you bought it, and back before even that, when you're like, I want it.
Keep going. You can go further than that. Your desire to drink that soda happened before you were born, man. It happened before the world started. It happened at the Big Bang and before. Your intention was, there was only one act of will that ever really happened, and that was the act of, there it is.
Yeah.
Once that happened, everything else is just a natural course of events that followed that first decision.
Well,
and we play with that decision all the time. And we modify that decision. We say, I really like this, but now I want to put this over here and see what that looks like. Like you said, it's play.
Yeah.
I'm going off in 3 different directions here, but
I brought this up for a basic fundamental reason. There are viewers, whether they're watching D.H. Thorne's channel, or whether they're watching the Black Towers channel, or they're watching anybody's channel. There's a basic fundamental here that, for example, you'll see these people, they're trying to sell this book and trying to sell that book. This person has like, oh, I have all these left-hand path books, and some people have all this book on Hermeticism and the Kabbalah and Enochian and all this other stuff. And they feel, and they end up feeling, what is that word? There's a word there. They feel like, that they're under that person. They feel like they're not as good as.
Oh, okay. They're subordinate or they're inferior or
inferior.
Okay.
So they feel inferior. And the thing is that, and this is why I brought you up, and this is also why, you're like one of the coolest motherfuckers I know, and it's why in my household Thorne's a name, and it's because you take what little bit you fucking have. Well, it's really not little, but my saying that means that it comes across as if it's just base fundamental stuff that everybody should know, common sense.
Wax on, wax off. It's like in Karate Kid. It's just wax on, wax off.
Yeah.
That's all. You don't need anything else.
Yeah, but the trick to it is take something that you want, learn. I don't care if you find it in a PDF form. I don't care if you get it in a paperback. It's not as pretty, if it's used, whatever. Get it, work with it. Just, learn your own system, your own way of working with them, kind of like how you have, And with that in mind, that was the basic fundamental reason for bringing that up, is that I recently got a half decent freaking library. Before then, it was all PDF. It was meditation. It was, blah, 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 yakety schmackety. And yet, even though I have them, guess what I find myself doing all the time?
Right.
Not reading those books. It's spent meditating and working with what I already have.
That's the natural way. This is, I hate to use a Dungeons and Dragons reference. I don't know if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons.
I fucking love it.
Oh man, you want to play, dude? You want to play some Roll20 with me sometime soon? I know some people who would love to have you. Listen, when you in Dungeons and Dragons, you have the different kinds of magic user. You have the wizard, the sorcerer, and all this.
Yeah.
And the distinction is often asked, what's the difference between a wizard and a sorcerer? Well, a wizard learns it and a sorcerer just does it.
Sorcerer is based on charisma.
Right. But what's charisma in that game? It's really will. It's really just, you're just going to do it. Yeah. Right? It's not how pretty you are. Some people think it's how pretty you are. That's the most stupid. I love Dungeons and Dragons, at least role-playing games in general, because it's actually connected to what we do, man.
I just haven't played in quite a few years, but yeah.
If you're an invoker on any level, you have to be familiar with role play just to get into the zone where the spirit can work through you. You have to look at every tribal culture in the world. What do? They put the headdress on. They start dancing around like they're the monkey. And the next thing you freaking know, after an hour of dancing like a monkey, they're a monkey. They're the monkey god for a little while, and it's real as rain to them when that happens.
Yeah.
The same thing happens in role play. The same thing. Anyway, I'm getting on a tangent. In Dungeons and Dragons, you have the wizard, who is a learned magic user. To them, magic is not something they feel and pump into something.
They've read it from books.
Right. They read a book and they just get an idea, and somehow somehow it does it. This would be these spiritually dead sorcerers and wizards that you see doing stuff where they just do a thing. They have their altar, and you can tell it's spiritually dead. There's nothing going on. Then you have the ones where, like me, probably like you, though I haven't seen you do any live stuff, but I get the impression just by the look in your eyes, and by the way, when I hear you recite the parts of you get preacher. You start. You can tell you get that preacher tone. There's a feeling there. You're not just saying the words. You're booming them in the astral plane. You hear that in the astral. Mostly people, when they do a spell and there's no booming in the astral plane. They're just reading it. Those are the wizards, and they can still get results. I don't want to tell them that they can't, but their results are going to be unpredictable, and they're not going to be holistic. When you get someone who feels their way through magic, they're a sorcerer. They're someone where it comes out, they feel what they're doing. They can make magic with a rock off the ground. They don't need a formula. They just pick the rock up and go, I'm going to put my will into this rock and put it right here in the road, and some motherfucker's going to trip over it and do what I want because they tripped over it. It's just a different way, but it tends to be more natural. It tends to require a lot less preparation in terms of study. What it does require, however, is symbols that we can all agree on. Symbolism is the most important thing in any magic. Why do you pick up a book of magic? Why are you going to pick my book up when I sell it? Or, why are you going to read it?
Because I personally like to read material that somebody else came up with. I like to read the words, and I don't necessarily adopt their mentality. I read what they got, what they wrote, and I sit there and then I judge. I discern it my own way, whether or not it's something that fits me, whether it's something, whatever. And then I'm looking
for symbols. You're looking for symbols that you can use in your own work. Yeah. That's what you're doing, okay? And if you read a really old book, and I got one in my hands, and you could ignore who edited it because some people probably won't like them, but you got like your Red Dragon here, right? And you look through this, and if you're like me, you look through this, and you're like, yeah, that's cool, because the symbols in here aren't part of my culture the same way that they were for the people who wrote this. The people who wrote this book, when they wrote it, the symbols that they wrote it in had a lot more meaning for them than they do now. They still can have meaning for us a little bit because some of us are into that anachronism. We can see the pictures and the diagrams and things. Oh, I get where that comes from. I studied enough of Kabbalah or this or that, and I can get what they mean. But for everybody else like me, I look at that book and I go, that's just a book of symbols that were relevant to them. If you take the symbols out and go with what the intention was, now you're talking about where the magic is in that book. And same thing with other books. This is why I'm not interested in the books as much, because once you understand this underlying current that the magic comes from, when you understand that, the symbols, you can interject your own symbols or create your own symbols, make them up in complete entirety, and it will work for you just fine, so long as those symbols interact with that essence of you. You have people like, I had somebody got mad at me the other day, not mad at me, but they countered me the other day because my working with Azazel used the Saturnian symbol that everybody uses. They said, well, that's Saturn. I said, well, I know that. That's not the point. He's like, well, who are you really contacting? Because that's not Azazel sigil, because it's actually this. I'm like, first of all, the sigil doesn't do anything except for open up an energetic gateway. Azazel will pass through whatever fucking gateway that's open around you. In this case, he'll pass through a Saturnian gateway, if that's what you're really worried about. Fine, I'm opening up a gateway to Saturn. Well, that's where Azazel is going to come through, as a Saturnian gateway, which means he's going to be, as you said before, my experience of him is going to be altered because of my interpretation, my experience. It's going to be so. Because I'm opening a Saturnian gateway, he's coming through as a Saturnian figure with a Saturnian energy and a Saturnian vibe. I'm okay with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you just wanted him to appear
right
this way. And that's my point with people, is that usually the first thing when someone comes to me with that, I'm like, fuck you. First off, this was my experience.
Right.
Second off, I'm not trying to preach or sell you shit.
Right.
Third off, I was just sharing.
Right. Well, not only that, but let's go back to the Necronomicon, because that's what you know the best. Now, of course, there's people who say it's not real and it's real and it's blah, 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 blah. You're interacting with real entities that seem to do exactly what they said to do, because whoever wrote that book tuned into something and wrote a book that was accurate for what he tuned into.
Weird shit.
And people will say, well, it's not real, Sumerian religion. Well, fuck no, that's not the point. The point is not that it has to be Sumerian religion. I don't consider you a Sumerian priest. I really don't, brother. I don't.
Thank you.
Why would I? It's not what you're doing.
I wasn't trying to do that.
Right. But I'm saying but that's what the perspective of these wizards is, the people who are the book learned sorcerers.
Oh, okay.
They look at you and this is why until recently, in the last 10 years or so, what you're doing was frowned upon entirely in every magical, they laughed at us, laughed at you. They laughed at everyone who did that stuff because they were stuck in this world of symbols.
Well, here's the funny thing. Before I did that, before I decided to bring it out or whatever, I decided to get my ducks in a row and be like, okay, if you're going to fucking question whether or not I know what the fuck I'm talking about or whether I channeled these secrets, no, I proved where I got every bit of my shit from.
And I often tell people when they ask, I say, this is a personal experience.
Yeah.
You give me anybody. I am still waiting for the day. I have an open invitation for anybody who does magic to prove to me that their experience of magic can be fully objective in the sense that this is the James Randi challenge. This is the James Randi challenge. Prove it to the skeptics that what you're doing is 100% real and violates every law of known physics. You're never going to do it because that's not how this works. It's a subjective experience that follows a path of rational events. And the occasional times when it does break the laws of physics, it's just going to be between you and the other people that believe it and see it when it happens.
Yeah.
I did a video recently where I didn't finish it. I scrapped it, but it was about the witching hour. And I wanted to get into, in that video, why the witching hour makes sense. The 3 o'clock to 4 a.m. time frame, why that makes sense. You have all these people are asleep. And that means that the only awareness in your local area is you. So there's no other objective awareness to intrude on your subjective belief. Yeah. So you can believe the shit out of something and probably make it happen if you're strong enough.
Yeah.
If you're in tune enough. Whereas if you're in a crowd of people and you do the same thing, it's maybe, you know what I mean? Now, at the same time, if you and I got together at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's not a lot of people in the middle of the woods somewhere, right? Or in the middle of the woods, I guess you could say. Why do you think so much magic is done in secret? It's not just because it's got to be secret or you get burned to the stake. It's because it's got to be in a private place to make it work.
Plus, you tap into secret power that way.
Well, that's true. But you can't have an interference from the other minds that are going to disturb your thing. So if you and I get together, okay, assuming you and I were fully on the same wavelength, which I don't think anybody necessarily is, but if you and I are on the correct wavelength with each other, we could have a very powerful experience together if we're alone somewhere. And who's going to believe us now, right? You're not going to be able to take that experience and say, I can prove it because Waylon saw it too, because some other guy saw it too. It's not going to happen.
Well, I'm going to throw something funny out there. It's like, if we went out to the woods and let's say it's 3 a.m. in the morning and we go out there with the intention, two different intentions. You want to conjure milk and all I want is fucking cookies. Well, there's not going to be
together pretty good.
There's not going to be a fight with me.
No.
Considering, well, he wants milk and I want cookies, and I'm not talking about we want milk and cookies, not that kind of agreement. Okay, let's say you just want milk and I just want cookies, and that's it. Well, first off, we're there for the exact same fucking thing, to conjure, to create something.
We have an automatic agreement about something that's fundamental, which is the possibility of the conjuring.
Which means we're going to be sharing power with one another to help them accomplish their goals instead of fighting against them. We're not going
to be creating interference. When you have like a sound canceling system, you know how that works? It works by actually injecting white noise into the system, which actually disrupts the other white noise and it makes it go away.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're intermingling signals that cancel each other out. So it's actually another noise that's canceling out the noise. If that
is fucking awesome.
Yeah. Well, the same thing happens spiritually, I think.
Yeah.
When you have two people who have two different, let's say me and a total skeptic, and we get into a place, maybe we're alone, whose manifestation is going to happen? Am I going to be able to convince him because I made a jar of cookies appear? Or is he going to say that jar of cookies was always there and you just lifted up the rock that's where they were the whole time because you planted them? Who's going to be more right?
I'm going to play the devil's advocate for just 1 minute. And I'm going to say it's a toss up, but I'm going to say normally the one who has the strongest will.
Okay, that's true, except there's one other thing. You and I both know that on a fundamental level, you and I still appreciate the objective worlds, even its skepticism.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
and I,
yeah.
you and I will look at one another and say, I believe that Azazel is real. But at some level, you and I both know that there's a limit to that where we'll say, well, maybe it's just real for me. We don't want to say that because it kind of makes us sound like we're not credible. But we have to be honest with ourselves. On some level, I've never met a true believer to the point where they're ready to slit their wrist to prove it. I've only met people who believe it strongly enough to work with it, because that objective skepticism that's in the world is unshakable. It's always there a little bit. So if me and a skeptic entered in a room and I was going to cast a spell to make a batch of cookies appear in front of me, okay, that's still latent skepticism that's in me. Even if I don't act on it, even if I push it way down and I don't agree with it, it's still there. So I still have that little
factor.
That little teeny bit of doubt, right? That little bit of interference means it won't ever happen.
Yeah.
This is where, in my book, I get into the idea of why you need rules to do magic. Because if you get rid of all the rules, if you get rid of every rule and believe that you can manifest anything you want at any time, it's no longer fun and it's no longer makes any sense. Because at that point, it's not magic anymore. It's literally think and happen.
Yeah.
No rules anymore. And we are having a game with ourselves. If we really wanted all the power in the universe to do anything we wanted at any given time, to completely reverse reality at any moment we wanted, we would just do that. Because we do have that power, I believe. I do believe you and I have the power. If we wanted, I could fill this glass just by saying it's full now, and it would fill up. The reason I don't is because that's not fun. I like the act of taking that bottle and pouring it. I like the act of having to do a spell for things. I like the game. I mean, if you play a video game and it's on God mode all the time, or you can skip to the end of the game, it's not fun anymore.
No, it's not.
So we need these limitations in our magic in order for it to have any meaning. We need to be able to say, I believe we probably could, but I've never had that happen.
Well,
to have the possibility and then the limit we need something to push against.
This is synchronistic as shit. You talking about the setting the rules. A few years back, I had my very first working with Belial, which was
that's a turmoil upheaval, ain't he?
5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
I was like, help me to build my kingdom.
And you always say it with a cringe because there's going to be a reshuffle.
I already know the cost. I love motherfuckers that think, oh, it's going to happen, and I'm just sitting there going, oh, you're in for a world of pain, but embrace it.
He's Machiavellian as fuck. If you say, I want $1 million, you better make sure not because he's a monkey's paw, but you better make sure you kiss and hug everybody you love because,
one of them's got to go.
Somebody might die.
One of them's got to go, yeah. But anyway, it was really funny, though, is that when I moved into this place, Mike Damon, very first words out of his mouth when I told him that I wanted to finish what I started, he said, set the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Set the rule? What do you mean set the rules? And I mean, and that's all he would say about it. And I'd be like, set the rules. And he's like, yeah, you have to set the rules by which you are going to be governed.
Yes. If you don't have them, it's not going to work.
And it was really fucking weird because, and I have no problem with the Bible itself because there are secrets hidden throughout it. But when they talk about the yoke
mm-hmm.
being light and all this other stuff, and the burden and so forth and so on, it came to my mind that you have to bind yourself, you have to be bound by whatever system to be able to harness the power and the energy, the intent, desire, will, the whole 9 yards, all the material needed to create any fucking thing.
Correct.
For example, it's the reason why a circle is cast around us. It isn't to keep out the devil. It's to fucking act as a focal point to craft the energies. And when he was telling me that that it was just like casting the circle, well, I already knew what the circle meant. It's just a focal point. It's not to keep anything out.
Like a line could keep out a god. Yeah.
Like, I mean, seriously, like I've seen this thing, oh, he can get through, don't you step out. Man, let me tell you what, I can't tell you how many times I've cast a fucking circle and decided halfway across the room was a book that I needed and walked right out and got it and came right back. And I have had wicked motherfuckers sit there and try to tell me, you had to recast the circle because you broke it because you were going to step through it. And I'm sitting there going, no, I didn't, because my will is absolute in the place where I dwell.
You're magically dead. Those are the magically dead people talking. Yeah.
Yeah, I am the circle, motherfucker.
They think magic is lines, circles, candles, and blobs of goo, and they don't get that it's something else. And we can go in a circuitous way and go all the way back around to the original topic of this conversation, which is why are we here?
Yeah.
These limitations of magic are the same thing. Okay, we are here because the limitations give us an experience. If we're in the astral realm, we can have anything we want just by thinking about it, can't we? Anyone who's done astral stuff knows that, especially if they can travel, you think it happens.
But it was no fun.
But it's no fun. Well, it can be. Like, the experience of flying is fun, but you created a limitation because like when you're in the astral, do you have to fly? No, you can just go poof and now I'm there.
Yeah, but it's more fun.
It's more fun to go whee. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's because flying is more limited than teleporting, isn't it?
Yeah. Although teleporting would be cool as shit.
But teleporting is limited too, because technically you could be everywhere at once if you wanted to be and you believed you could be. There's no reason why you couldn't. Try it sometime. I've never been there, but I speculate if you really believe it, you'll do it. If you're in the astral, you can go everywhere at once. And you'll probably have a mental break and I'll never hear from you again, but try it.
I created a system years and years ago, and I have two runes, two symbols that I use. One's for the astral and one's for the etheric. And this was back in the day I was working on etheric manipulation. Like, how do you manifest something for reals without having to go through all the bells and whistles?
Yeah. And I'm not here to say it can happen. I'm just saying, yeah.
Well, when I figured out how to do it, and I watched it happen time and time again, I sat back and I was like, nope, I'm going back to the way I used to do it. It was way more fun because it just was. Mm-hmm. When you realize, and this comes back to the point of what I was pointing out about you don't need all these books to do all these things, you see, and that's my point. But it is what we do. It's how we do it.
I grab these books because they give me some new symbols to play with. They're new Tinker Toys is all they are.
It's funny. I was telling my wife earlier, I was telling my wife earlier when I was watching your video, I was getting down and I was like, shh, trying to listen to my boy Thorne, and I was sitting there and I was listening to it, and after the video and everything, I was like, you know what? If I was going to actually try to send him a gift or a present, I said, you know what it'd be? She's like, what? I was like, it'd be a book of just demons. I said, and just say, Merry Christmas, Happy Birthday, Happy Hanukkah. Enjoy yourself. I said, because someone like him can take something that stupid, that simple, and not that it's stupid or simple, but understand what I'm saying. You can, literally, people like you can take something like that and can do 1,000,000 times more than the people that have wrote 1,000 books on one fucking subject.
Like you said before, why do you do a path working? Now, I've never finished a path working in my life. Now, that some people are going to look at me and say, you're stupid for being like that.
You are now, though. A 30-day promise?
That's not a full path work. That's a 30-day promise. A full path working with him would be something different.
No, but I'm saying it is a path working of sorts.
Oh, it is. Maybe you could say this will be the first one I finish. But I'm saying from a book. I've never gone through a book and done a path working through a book. I've never sat there and said, let me go through this and then consecrate that and blah, 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 evoke this entity, evoke that entity, and get it all. And then bang, now I've initiated. Even with the Black Book of Azazel, even with other things that I've been into, I'll play with it for a little bit. I'll get what they're saying, and I'll say, good enough.
Do you know why I did it?
What's that?
Do you know why I honestly did it? Why I've done any of the things I've done? Self-control.
Mm-hmm.
It's a discipline.
Well, there's your limitation that you need again. And sometimes I got to learn that too. I think, and in a way, it's important that you bring up that because that's what Azazel's probably trying to do with me. He's probably saying, look, give me 30 days. Not because he needs 30 days out of my life. Give me a break. He can spend the rest of my life teaching me what he wants to teach me. He wants me to just show the dedication of 30 days and say, you did it once, you're good. And I may stick with him after that. The kind of thing I'm experiencing with him, is been unique. The only other entity that came close was Nyarlathotep. Every other entity's been much more subtle or quick or over and done with. And thanks, we had a good time. We'll talk again. Nyarlathotep was the only other one where I'd have days of.
Say that slower.
What's that?
Say that deity's name slower.
Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep. I can't say it that way because it's wrong to me.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Because Hotep is the title. So Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep is his name. Hotep is his title. Nyarlathotep.
Okay.
Just like I say Azazel, as El is the title. So, like Daniel San, instead of.
Yeah, I got you. I'm sorry, continue where you were, though.
So the only other entity that gave me that profound and long-lasting trickle of just new ideas and gnosis was that entity. Because when this happens and you enter into this kind of situation with them, for me, those are the ones I really want to work with. Those are the ones, I could conjure, and Malphas was close too. Malphas has been a rather constant thing, but he's more subtle. He's more animalistic. He's more, I think he was, if anything in history, he was just a raven or a crow, something was worshipped by tribal people and he became a demon or whatever, demonized. He probably has his correlations that way. So he's more subtle and enigmatic and more like, by the way, whereas these guys are more like they're teaching me and they're dropping knowledge. Nyarlathotep was more like creepy, mysterious, and just sciencey, and I had a lot of sciencey thoughts. Azazel too, but Azazel's been more biblical. It's been way more biblical. I've been forced to go back into Bible study, and I hate studying the Bible because 90% of it's bullshit, and the parts that aren't are diluted, twisted, and fucked up, so you can't understand them anymore.
Missing in fragments, pieces, and not the whole thing.
Yeah, and you got to take it all as metaphors in this, but there's still like the Book of Enoch. Now I have to read the Book of Enoch at some point so I can fully grasp, what he's showing me as well. Because as I said in that video, I keep my outside influence to a minimum till the working is done. And if I do, I only work on the things they tell me. I try not to, like, I bought a book recently about the Book of Enoch that I'm going to be reading later, but I only skimmed a few sections to see if they correlated to what he told me, and they did. So I was like, cool. Now I can go back and read the rest of that book when I'm done. I don't want to pollute my mind at all with what other people are experiencing or writing about until I'm done with the path working, because the trickle that I'm getting is too pure. It's too good. I'd rather work through it on my own and then play with it. And this is what you're talking about. Like, you could take a book of entities and work through it and that's why it works for me, because I don't try to copy what some other, pardon my French, asshole has done in a book, because that's their experience. That's their magic. That's their gnosis. I want my own gnosis. So just tell me the radio station and I'll call the guy myself.
Yeah. It's like, years ago, I wasn't like anybody else. I picked up the book of 50 fucking names, man.
Right.
Calling them and shit. Well, it wasn't too long into that. I was working that I realized that experience disappeared. It faded. It's like a high.
Yeah.
You get high and high, and go away.
You can run hot and cold on these things.
Yeah. And the thing is that as I kept working through these things, I kept trying to remember their energy signatures, what they felt like. Not because so that I could summon them easier, but so that I could recreate those energies within myself to be able to do the things that they did.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's why invocation is so important.
Yes, which at that point is when I decided and took it upon myself that I was going to learn a system, in this case, high magic, with the going down thelemic, initiation in the grades and stuff. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because it was so important that if I was going to learn how to harness and maintain a state of being, check that. Right. And what I needed to develop was mental, emotional discipline.
Right. You have to have all three. The Trinity comes back again. The mental, emotional, physical, that's mind, body, and spirit again, because emotion is a spiritual function. Now, I don't mean the sensation of, I don't mean like the chemistry of emotion. I mean the experience of emotion is spiritual.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to leave out the physical. The physical for me is like when you take time to meditate, when you take that, you're physically disciplining yourself. You're doing the physical. So yeah, the Trinity definitely was there.
You always do. Like, when you do an effective magical act, okay, yes, you can absolutely do a magical act missing any one of those components.
There's the desire, there is the casting, and then there is the giving thanks. And a lot of people miss that last one, and the reason why is because you're saying it already happened, and you're giving it more energy, not necessarily to help it manifest, but it's sound like sealing the door of your mind, saying it's already been.
That's why somebody has said that, like, oh, well, my stuff's not working anymore. I'm having failures. And I say, do a spell for something that's dead ass honest going to happen. You know what I mean? Do a spell for something that has a 90% probability of happening already.
Yeah. I
do this over and over again. And as you said, celebrate it. Do a spell for the sun will come up tomorrow. Now that's a stupid one, but do something along those lines where you go, it worked. You're playing a mind game with yourself, because the worst thing that ever happens when you're doing magical practice is to get that little grain of doubt, that little mustard seed of doubt that goes in and gets caught in your brain. And you go, did I really experience that, or was I making that up? Did this really happen to me the way I saw it, or was that just my perspective? Did that painting just fall off the wall because the spirit did it because I said, give me a sign? Or was it just time for that thing to fall?
Yeah, right.
So that's where you get like this little mustard seed of doubt from. You have to, for me, like, I still play with that because, as you said, I had completely shelved all magic for more than 15 years.
Yeah.
I disbelieved in it. I blocked it out of my life because I decided that magic had no rules. Okay. That was one of the reasons. And I started trying to do the impossible. And when impossible wouldn't happen, I started to doubt, because it's not about doing the impossible. It's about doing the possible with powerful intent. As you often say, it's a supplement to your mundane efforts. It's much more effective that way than when you try to move heaven and earth. It's much easier to just walk to where you want to go and make sure you have a little bit of magic to give you support along the way.
Yeah, gives that boost.
Gives you that boost. Well, I started to really believe, because of the things I was experiencing, I would have shadows fighting people. I had a cult going. I could do all kinds of crazy. I could make you see whatever the fuck I wanted. I could hypnotize you to make even a skeptic would shit their pants because people would be doing things they didn't understand. I had that going, and it was scaring me. It was starting to get to be too much, and I started to believe I can do any goddamn thing I want. And I started doing it, but I couldn't get certain things to manifest in my life that I needed. I couldn't get money to just happen. I couldn't get this to just happen, that to just happen. And I would get really physically strong. I could do all these things that are not superhuman, but human.
Supernatural.
So a little bit extra natural, we'll say. Okay. I mean, not to the point where I could pick you up with one hand and throw you like a rag doll, but where I could pick you up with two hands and throw you like a rag doll. Believably extra strong. Okay. Things like that. I could tell where you were. I could tell what you were thinking. Synchronistic things would happen, but I couldn't get this cup to float across the room. You know what I mean? You start getting too big for your britches, and you start getting this point where once you start getting, this is like when you're a young child and you're having this happen, that's where the fall happens. You start believing you can do anything, and you start forgetting the rules, that you can't do anything that you want. You start developing doubt because more and more your magic is failing. You're trying to do too much. You're trying to manifest too much. You're trying to cause too much to happen. I really did a spell for this person to have a car accident, and they didn't have one. You start to just crumble.
It's like you and I discussed. That was something you needed. You needed to come to that realization. I am more than this. I am powerful. I'm strong. I'm capable. You need that door open. Okay. Now the rest of it, that comes with you. It just does. Okay. And exuberance and so forth and so on. Now, did you, looking back, did you see where you are now? No one ever does. But you're sitting here. Where do you see yourself? A year, 2, 5, 10 years. See, right. I do this constantly because whatever I do in the here and the now is going to affect that vision.
Yeah.
And so, and I use that as a guidance instead of where most people look behind, oh, well, I used to be poor and broke, so that means I'm going to take everybody for every dime I can. No, man.
Stupid.
Dude, just keep an idea of where you want to go.
Right.
And choices and options that come into your life this day. Make a decision. If I do this, will I actually reach that point?
And some of us have a very special relationship with the watchers, the guardians, the guides, whatever you want to call it. And it's still up to us to do what we have to do, but we are going to achieve or do or become or experience things that are being presented to us. Yeah. So I've told you my dream where I had about being near the head of the table and all this other stuff in the social scene. Okay. Yeah. The big names in magic, sooner or later, I'm going to be up there with them. I just know it. And it's been told to me. And it's for me to fail. It doesn't mean it will happen. It means it's for me to fail. So everything that's happened to me in the last 4 months, I've had this meteoric rise in popularity, in notoriety. I've met you. I've gone through these things. And it just keeps going up and up and up and up. And it only stagnates when I personally don't. Like if I see an opportunity and I don't grab it, or if I'm just feeling out of it, I don't feel like doing it today, that's when I stumble. This course has been like, when you ask me, where am I going to be in a few years? I honestly don't know. I just know it's going to be much higher because
Yeah.
it's been shown to me. Does that mean I will achieve it? It's for me to fail.
Well, say
But
we've discussed roles and places.
mhm.
Uh, like for example, I don't think of myself as way up here, but I don't put myself down either. I know for a matter of fact, like with my channel, the last couple of things, I love doing interviews with people. I love sitting and talking and doing stuff, and I love making my own videos for the Simon Necronomicon or even sorcery or whatever, stuff like that. But one thing that became very important to me was helping these lesser known or these other ones and kind of help them get there. And it's not because I want worship and praise. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that when I help somebody else, I'm actually helping my fucking
Of course you are. Of course, when I was teaching martial arts, I couldn't wait to teach because that's how I knew I was going to learn more.
Yeah.
When you're getting the lesson, you're getting the lesson. When you're trying to teach it, now you really got to learn it to teach it. You got to really put yourself into it. But not only that, that's another bit of synchronicity. Why is it when I first started playing with this, you were one of the first people I came across in the chat group for S. Kane.
Yeah. And months later, you're not ignoring me. You're
and I did it first.
Him.
Yeah, I liked your videos at first, and they found that I got an understanding of something I didn't understand before. I was like, well, that's cool. Let me just put them on my subscribe list. I watched maybe 10 or 20 of your videos. I got something out of it, and that was when I was a skeptic. So I was like, that's good. I'm done. And then out of a clear blue sky, I recognized your eyes, and I'm like, that eyes have seen something that I've seen when I was younger. You had that same look in your eye. And it's not a dead eye. There's a look in your eye that has like this. I've been there. And I was like, I know this face. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the Black Tower guy. And that's why I messaged you.
Yeah.
And just add it. Now, why do these things happen? These are the doorways opening for at least me, probably both of us, because as I go, my philosophy is, as I'm Luciferian, I don't like to lead. I don't like to push down. I like to just kind of set the block. And if people want to follow me, they can. You want to walk with me, you can. And anybody who's with me, let's go. Let's all be together. You know what I mean? So I don't like to use people any more than I like to use a strong breeze. I want to go with this. I want to make this happen because, I'm kind of tired of just being a nurseryman. I'm kind of tired of just, the mundane life. I realized that this is who I am. I stifled this for 20 years almost.
Yeah. I thought it was funny too. You're not the only one that noticed your meteoric rise, and I pay attention to it. And it's not jealousy. It's not envy with me.
Oh, I hope not, because it's all because of you, brother. It's because of people like you. I have
pride. It is a sense of pride with me because I'm like, hell, fuck yeah, I actually helped, and that makes it worth to me. And a lot of people can say, well, where did you get out of that? And I'm like, because bitches, 6-7 months later, fucker's still talking to me. That's still my boy.
Oh, I will always come on your channel, man. I will always come. And not only that, but when we were talking about that whole thing with the occult store, I was only halfway lying. If I said to myself, "Hey, I got a real thing going. Waylon needs a job. Let's start an occult store somewhere that's the right kind."
Fuck yeah, put the shit together and make it work.
Put it together, man. Stuff like that. I love networking with people of like minds because you said to me one time, "It's lonely at the top," and I think you were saying that about me, but I think it's about you too. When you have a certain perspective on things, it's lonely being there and nobody gets you. It's lonely.
So if you can't bring them up to your level, quit trying to squash them down. What the fuck? You like being up there by yourself? And a lot of people don't understand me that when I'm doing these things and I'm doing this, it's not that I'm trying to advertise for people. I'm trying to sell their services, their books, their blah, blah, blah. It is because I have respect for that person that I'm interviewing. It is because I think of them as family. As soul family, brothers, sisters, so forth, so on. And that's not a word I toss around lightly. I'm comfortable in my skin. I say I fucking love you. I fucking love you, man. And you can take that however the fuck you want it, but it's just how it is. But you'll notice what I mean by that, by the way I treat you and how I do you, and how I am by you.
Yeah. I don't believe in using people, because I used to do that. That's why I often bring up to you in particular that cult origin that I had, because I was like the Dracula sucking the blood out of everybody around me.
Yeah, but you can't do that to me because I'm actually offering.
I mean, it was but I don't like using people. It bothers me on a level where it's kind of like, if I'm that powerful, why am I using anybody?
Yeah.
Right? I like it to be a cooperative thing. I like to say, let's do. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to use my force of will to influence, but it does mean that I am not going to take advantage and use people. I'm going to see, okay, Waylon is a nice guy. This guy's a nice guy. S. Ben Kane, these people, they're all cool people. I want to work with them on their level, on what they're doing, and study what I can, and then give back to them somehow. Whether it's be do an interview for them because they want to do it, or if it's because, this person is going through this, I want to send them a necklace, or I want to give them something.
Yeah, it's a token of gratitude.
It's a token of gratitude. This is why, like in Dark Sorcery, you can say what you want about whoever you want. I owe them a debt for putting me in a position where I'm an admin that does most of the posting of content and stuff, teaching content, stuff like that. Yeah. They trusted me. Alfredo saw one post of mine, liked it, and said, "Would you like to be an admin?" And that's when I was like, "That's King Paimon right there. He's networking me right now." He basically said, "Alfredo, check this out." And I got pulled into this group, and next thing I know, I'm the one posting, and you got JB and you got Alfredo and you got all these cool people that do all these things. And here I am. Okay. And now I've got and I respect them. I tell them all the time, I'm loyal to this group because of that. You guys opened this door for me, and I'm not going to ever forget it because you gave me a shot. I had 20 people on my Facebook page because it was brand new.
But let me say this though, because we kind of need to be bringing this to.
Oh yeah, we've been doing this for like an hour or 2
hours.
Yeah.
So allow me to say this: there'll be people sitting here watching this and that, and the other, and they'll be listening to this. But it's like I told you, I didn't do fucking shit. You did it all yourself. You did the work. You did the commitment. You stuck with it. You kept working through it. Now, maybe I might have been like an open door. Just, you just needed that one door to open up, But that's me playing my role that I know very well. I know my place in this world. I know who I am.
John the Baptist.
Fuck that shit, dude. That fucker had his head cut off and gave some bitch. Fuck that.
I won't let him do that.
All right, thank you. You owe me, damn it. Don't you let him put my head on.
I wouldn't let you be a John. That wouldn't be fun. Put it
on a pike, bitch.
Yeah.
Pikes are cool.
You can be my Merlin. How about that? You be my Merlin.
Can I get the crystal cave?
What's that?
Can I have a crystal cave?
Oh, hell yeah. You like that original Excalibur movie, right?
Hell yeah.
That's the best Merlin ever. I always wanted that skull cap he's got.
Yeah, I like it.
Why do you think I shave my head the way I do? Because it gives me that feeling like I got the skull cap on.
Oh, holy shit, dude. I never actually put two and two together. I always thought you had a unique haircut, but I was like, I've seen that type of style.
Well, it's like an MMA thing. It's like a mohawk thing, but it's also because I didn't used to do that. I used to be like the metalhead with the big, luscious locks coming down. If you've ever seen my old pictures from high school, I always had the big, luscious locks. I look like Peter Steele or something like that. Yeah. Fat Peter Steele.
Like I had to remove my picture on Facebook because, like, I did that. I went.
I remember that one. Yeah.
I shaved my head because the ancient priest would shave all the hair off their body, and the reason why is because of static electricity, and because it was just a form of cleansing and purification and so forth, so on. And one day I was in the middle of doing this, and all of a sudden I was like, "Holy shit! Oh, I got to take a picture of this." And then after a while, I just kept looking at it. It's like, all I see is Chicken Little. Fuck that!
Oh shit! Yeah.
So it was for humor, but I had to put it down. But brother, just no shits whatsoever, man. Dude, I'm quite happy to be your brother, and dude, it tickles me to fucking death to watch a brother succeed. Because I don't need a goddamn thing.
I'm going to keep striving. I'm going to keep striving for people who, I don't want to let anybody down, least of all you guys and myself. But, I'm going to keep striving while it's fun anyway. I'll be doing it.
Because you know what's going to happen? One day you're going to be up there at the table, as you call it, and you're going to be, like the king of your own kingdom, that sort of thing, And all of a sudden, man, just one day you're going to be sitting there and you're going to be going through Facebook, and all of a sudden you're going to see somebody, and this is what's going to happen. You're just going to connect, and when you do, you're going to do them the way I did. You're just it's just going to happen.
Yeah, just go. Yeah, I was a part of that experience. Well, you're going to have that too, man. You have your own thing that you're developing in your own system, your own. For you, I think social media is a way for you to obviously empower what you do because it gives you a reason to do certain things, and it gives you a reason to keep studying, and it gets you to rub elbows with all these other people, and you learn so much by doing that. You know, that's your way. My way is to pick it up and just do it. Your way is to like, how are you doing? How are you doing? Let me try this. Let me do this. Now let me teach you what I learned. You're the socialite. You're the one who's really trying to create a hub, you know.
Yeah, well, you know, you kind of got to. The Black Tower, it stands at the center of the rays. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean everything has to come to it, blah, blah, blah. It is what it is. It's a powerful symbol. But the thing is that, you know, like I've got 3 major things going on this year. I have a surgery to fix my physical. You know, I've got a course I've got to finish putting together. I've got a book I've got to finish writing, you know. And those are 3 major things that I'm working on, you know. But to do all that, first things first. The body has got to be fixed, you know. So this one.
It's an extraordinary circumstance, you know. Like I don't have that problem, so I can devote, especially this winter when I don't have to work full time, I can devote all my time. I mean, last 2
months though.
What's that?
You had to work, and you were always tired.
Yeah, I mean, I'm off. I can do whatever I want until March.
Yeah,
and I'm writing this book pretty much. I took off the last 2 days, and I feel like crap for it.
I tell you what's going to happen. We're going to sit there and we're going to, like, you know, swap books to one another and be like, yeah, here's what I came up with. You're going to be like, oh, you're going to like this.
Except for one problem, I don't read much. So
dude, go put it on the back of your fucking commode. I'm not saying it's only good for taking a dump.
I'll read it, man. I'm kidding. It's just, you know, I got to thumb through it because I mean, I used to read it all day, all long for stories, but reading magic books to me is like.
Well, sometimes it's a wash, rinse, and repeat. It's like everybody's saying the same fucking thing. They're regurgitating the same shit.
You know how many people say non-dualistic things in their books and don't even know they're freaking saying it? Now, S. Connolly in particular, she knows she's saying it. But you got Coeting in particular. He cracks me up. And I don't mean to insult him. In my last video, I said he said this thing from Azazel, and I don't think he realized what he was saying. But that was part of the gnosis that made me go, yeah, I think he did get in contact with something, because he said something that sounded like what Azazel would say. Yeah. And he was saying it like he didn't fully comprehend what he was saying, but he was speaking a very non-dualistic language at that moment. And I said, you know, this is why when you look, all the top guys, not all, but it's very common. It's very common for people to have this same thought. Yeah. And that's how you know there's something going on.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I know we're running long. I don't want to just keep going.
Well,
but,
you know, it was an honor to have you on here. And I know good and damn well you have fun any chance you can get on and say what you're thinking or feeling or whatever. So that's kind of cool.
I'm like my grandfather, just
dude, I'm the same way. So without further ado, I thank each and every one of our viewers for hanging in there or watching through this whole thing. And if you skip through, that's okay.
It was a long one. I don't blame anybody for not making it to the end of this one.
No shit. So without further ado, peace, blessings, and power. Until next time.